I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1785. That was the day the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York was founded. 22 skilled craftsmen with the motto, "By hammer in hand, all arts do stand," met on Pine Street to form a benevolent organization that could provide culture, education, and social services to craftsmen and their families. 2 months later, founders met for their annual meeting. They represented many of the city's trades, including hatters, butchers, sailmakers, bolters, and comb makers. In his book, Chance Democratic, historian Sean Willett states, "The General Society was intended to be a semi-political umbrella organization for all of the city's independent mechanics, to help oversee the trades and secure favorable legislation from local and national government. The group captured the ideal of mutuality and craft pride essential to artisan fraternities since the Middle Ages. The General Society opened one of the city's first free schools at a time when there were no public schools. It established a tuition-free Mechanics Institute, the General Society Library, and lecture series. The Mechanics Institute, founded in 1858, continues to provide free evening trades-related instruction. The library, established in 1820, is the second oldest library in New York City. It is also one of the few remaining membership-circulated libraries. Its collections and archives span 2 centuries. The General Society continues its tradition of public lectures in the form of the Labor, Literature, and Landmark series. More recently, it has added the Artesian Lecture series that features lectures by master artisans. The series also promotes the work and art of skilled craftsmen. The General Society has been at its current location at 20 West 44th Street since 1885.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1785. That was the day the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York was founded. 22 skilled craftsmen with the motto, "By hammer in hand, all arts do stand," met on
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for tuning in. Today on the program, we're going to be talking to some folks at the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis, Missouri. To me, labor's history is one of those things that I spend a lot of time on. I think it's important to know about the past because it'll help us figure out the fights that are coming in the future. And also, while we're talking about the history, looking at history and what it's going to mean in the post-Janus world. Out of this convention, lots of resolutions are going to be passed, lots of great ideas, lots of high ideals. What is actually going to hit the streets? We're going to talk about some of that stuff today. Look, single payer front and center. The idea of holding manufacturers and employers accountable, to me, is so very important. So we're going to get to a lot of that stuff. And look, I love these conventions because it's full of ideas, it's full of passion, full of, well, hope. And at the end of it, our hope is that, well, we move forward as a working class. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Going to take a quick break, right back with Ben Blake, archivist from the University of Maryland. We're here at the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis. Back a couple years ago, we had done a labor history tour. Took the kids all across the country, drugged them across the country, if you hear their stories, to find labor's history. And one of the things that I found is that, well, in a lot of places it's been destroyed, and in many places it's been rewritten. And the question becomes is, how do we save the history of the working class? How do we save that history, and should we? That's why I've got Ben Blake here to come talk with us. He's an archivist at the University of Maryland at College Park. Ben, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you for this great opportunity.
I guess first, for those of us who don't know, what's an archivist?
Well, what we do is take in original material unique items, usually one-of-a-kind records of organizations. It might be photographs, videotapes, audio tapes, those kind of things. And we preserve them and make it available to researchers, and which could be, the general public, students, rank and file union members, union leadership. So the difference between an archivist and a librarian basically organizes and catalogs published materials. So there's, thousands of copies or hundreds of copies out there. Archivists deal with material that generally there's one copy of, and it's unique. So, and generally documents an organization or personal papers of an individual. Those are kind of the two main things, or it might be a government agency also.
Yeah.
So.
I go back to this trip we took, and one of the things that I learned almost immediately is that labor's history is being rewritten.
Yeah.
And it's so important to have those first-hand accounts. And look, I was a graduate of the Meany Center, and they had a wonderful archive to where you could actually go back and read the records of the founding, the founding meetings of the AFL and the founding meetings of different unions, and you could see in their words at that moment.
Yeah.
And to me, that's priceless.
Yeah. And that, like at Maryland, in 2013, we received the Meany archives. So basically, the entire archives was transferred to us when the Labor College closed. So we're continuing that tradition, and the guys that we have now are all the ones that the Meany archives created, and we're beginning to build on those. But you can't beat looking at the original material. It really gives you a sense of, what it was like to be there, and also, like you say, right now, I mean, in an era where Ronald Reagan's being honored as a labor hero, somebody who broke the PATCO union and really started the striker replacement movement in management, that tells it all in terms of the importance of preserving the history for the union movement and for the working class as a whole, for everybody.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're doing as an example to bring this out, I mean, the tough part for archives, we have usually small staff, a lot of limited resources. Sometimes we kind of do the rescue thing where, somebody's closing, we hear that they may be throwing things away, so we get there before they get thrown out. A lot of times they may not know about us, so getting the word out that we're there, that we're available to take in labor records if you're thinking about throwing them out or something is really something we've done a lot of.
Right.
And then the other thing is making it available digitally. So a lot of people can't travel to College Park. If you're in California, it's hard to go. So we're trying to get as many things digitized as we can. We have the AFL-CIO News, the whole run digitized and online. We put that online a couple years ago. We just put online last year the CIO News. So you can go back to the original newspapers, and it's a great source to counter what you're talking about, the falsification of fake history, or from a conservative, more management-oriented view. If you can go online and you can see the original newspapers of the time, you can see a totally different view of what was going on. You can go back, look at AFL-CIO News and PATCO, and look at what Reagan did and what really happened.
Right.
And there's a book out. Joe McCartan wrote a book on PATCO that talks about that, and part of the material he used was from our archives. So that's one of our roles too, is to make the archives available to scholars that are writing about labor history and writing real history that'll be useful to the labor movement. And
not just reinterpretations of myths and made up ideas. But here's the thing, I mean, a couple of years back, and maybe you remember this, it was like 2010, 2011, there seemed to be across this country a push to continually wipe out labor's history. I know in Alabama they had a really nice labor archive and a labor education center that was closed down because of, well, money. And unfortunately they saved some of their stuff. I know in Pennsylvania IUP ended up doing away with theirs. And a lot of this stuff, they just say, you know what, chuck it, we don't need it.
Yeah.
And there aren't a lot of places like the University of Maryland that you can donate that stuff to.
Yeah, and that, I think that's really true. It kind of went hand in hand with eliminating labor studies. As they were eliminating labor studies and really trying to reduce labor history too on campuses, reduce the number of professors teaching it and those kind of things. That kind of went hand in hand with labor archives. A lot of the smaller labor archives programs, they cut a full-time labor archivist and combine it with other jobs, that kind of thing. So And the other thing is space. You know, we need a lot of space to store all these records. A lot of stuff, you know, still
temperature control and all of that, so that
Yeah,
it doesn't
yeah.
get destroyed. But I think it's that important that we have to do that, because look, we hear this all the time, and you as an archivist, maybe you can speak to it better than I can. That old saying, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
You look at a lot of the discussions they were having, you know, 100 years ago in labor.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff we're talking about today. We're just seem to be, we're repeating history with just different flavors. I talk about the Lochner era a lot on our program. And you go back and you look at the arguments that they were making for liberty of contract. We're making the exact same arguments today, only we're calling it freedom.
Right, right. And eliminating the gains of the past are called reforms now, when in fact they're taking things away. It's really kind of a reactionary kind of actions. But yeah, I think what's really important is that, like you say, that the original record really, you go back, like in our exhibit, we have an online exhibit that shows, for example, on immigration. You know, well, the labor movement started out in the 19th century, it's pretty conservative, you know, pretty much anti-immigration, but over a period of time, totally reversed the position and evolved, and things like the farm workers had a big impact. So today, the labor movement is championing, you know, the rights of the undocumented workers, and that's a really important story to show how the labor movement interacted with over time, all these various social justice movements, and changed the labor movement and helped change those movements too, so that they're mutually supportive of each other. You know?
Well, because do you think they figured out that, you know, the divide and conquer mentality? Because look, we could point to hundreds of instances, you know, of convict lease programs in the South to pit white and black workers against each other. You know, immigrants and natives against each other. There's all of this history that we got to learn from, where we go, you know, we made these mistakes, let's not do it again.
Yeah, I was looking, I was doing a little research for our exhibit. I was looking back at the founder of the precursor of the American Federation of Labor in 1881, some of the resolutions they passed: elimination of convict labor, you know, things like legalization of unions, which now is under threat. You know, it goes back, and that's, you know, 1881. It's the same kind of issues still resonate today. And that's why that historic record, learning about the past to make a better future, you know, not just to study it kind of for its own sake. We really want to study it to make a better society. And if we don't have that history, there's no way you can do that. You know, you're kind of flying blind. You know, you're kind of starting over again, reinventing things. And the history is so tremendous. There's been so many amazing struggles on a whole range of issues. And like our job in the labor archives, more and more, it used to be back, you know, 20, 30 years ago, we'd kind of sit back in the archives and just kind of let stuff come in and be kind of passive and, you know, work back in the stacks. Now, with the digital revolution, our biggest part of our job now is to make people aware of us, make things accessible, so that things like you're talking about, when people try to destroy the records, you know, people will call us and we can come in and rescue any records that are under threat. That's really a key role now. And
well, you had told me an interesting story yesterday that, you know, where I grew up in Cleveland, LTV Steel was going under, and a lot of their records were being lost, and one of the big corporate law firms, which will go unnamed, they wanted to chuck all these records, because why, as a corporate law firm, what interest is it in for them to have these records preserved?
Yeah, and that was a liability issue. Like, a lot of times corporate America, they just want to save stuff that makes themselves look good, or branding, those kind of issues. Like Coca-Cola has a big archives that's more about branding, you know, rather than the real history there. And
that's the problem. I mean, that's really the problem when we've turned history into how do we use it for our benefit instead of what it actually is. And historians are, look, if historians can disagree over facts, I'm okay with that. When we start rewriting it to make us look better, or for a certain, you know, I'll give you an example. We went to Martinsburg, West Virginia on our tour, and we ended up looking for this marker that was supposed to be at this roundhouse where the Great Strike of 1877 started, the railroad strike. Long story short, I had to go through the roundhouse, jump off the platform, walk a quarter of a mile along the railroad tracks, and look up on the other side of an alley to find this marker, which it looked like there were 50 corporate guys and one labor guy coming together on an agreement of what the workers did in 1877, because they had not only hidden it, they had whitewashed it.
Yeah.
And that to me is not how we should be dealing with this kind of history, which is why I loved the archives, because you could hold in your hands that stuff and you could read their words.
Yeah.
Which is why I got to be honest. What we see coming out of President Trump and out of the Twitter thing, in 100 years, those people are going to be able to hold those tweets in their hand, and they'll make their decisions based on exactly what they read.
And it's like in creating this exhibit, which the theme is like labor, the history of the labor movement, particularly AFL-CIO, the kind of mainstream labor movement, its relation to social justice. It's like every day. It's like an issue comes up and go, oh yeah, we have a section in the museum about that. Immigration, we have a section on that. Environmental justice, we have a section on that. You know, the fight for 15, living wage. You know, it seems like every day a tweet comes up that we have a direct sort of anecdote to that that's documenting the real history. And I think that you're absolutely right. Like, one of the things I think, you know, archives and history is kind of a pillar of democracy. I mean, if you look at, say, you know, the Nazi Germany and stuff, what did they try to do? They try to destroy history and rewrite it. And that's something we never want to see here. And so, you know, that's one of the things that I feel is very important. Like, our National Archives was really founded in the 1930s, and I don't think that was a coincidence. You know, you look at what was happening in Europe, and they said, no, we really need to preserve our history here, our Constitution, our freedoms, our Bill of Rights. We have to make sure that that's absolutely preserved so that it doesn't get taken away.
Yeah. So as a historian, I mean, as an archivist, as someone who's passionate about history like you are, how frustrated are you that it seems that we're in an era of know-nothingism, and an era of, you know, where almost intelligence and critical thinking is mocked? I'm struggling with that because, you know, I love delving into things, and yet facts don't seem to matter anymore. We're in a world of alternative facts, to use a Kelly Conway term.
Which is really dangerous, because if you start looking at quote-unquote alternative history, I mean, there are Holocaust deniers, for example, that today publish books saying Holocaust never happened, you know, and that kind of thing is extremely dangerous. Like, in our exhibit, we had a module on religious freedom for that reason, and talked about the labor movement founding the Jewish Labor Committee, which played a big role in funding refugees, getting them out of Germany, and funding the underground. The underground labor movement was trying, and the underground against Hitler. And to me, that's a great example, because you look at Charlotte, and, you know, you have anti-Semitism coming back, you know, along with Islamophobia and all these problems. And you have to, I think, be able to show the history that, oh, there's a whole decades and decades and over a century of the labor movement fighting against anti-Semitism and fighting for the rights of religious freedom and defending those rights, really for 200 years. And that's so important, because those rights are taken away. Well, then everyone's rights start. You know, it's a... The
old Pastor Niemöller quote.
Yeah, exactly. If a certain group's rights are taken away, then all our rights are immediately threatened, and it will be just a matter of time before we lose all our rights. They're all interconnected.
Yep.
And I think that, like, the 1877 rail strike, you know, is a great example. I mean, you know, we were talking about Bill Berry and his efforts to get the plaque put up in Baltimore.
He's done fantastic work there in Baltimore.
Yeah, and it's just a huge struggle. It took years. And I know, like, in Youngstown, I worked there a couple of years and helped, to some extent, work with the Steel Museum in the university. And, you know, the plaque there says, oh, there was a little steel strike in 1937. There was kind of, you know,
they got shooting tube right.
Yeah. But it doesn't talk. The 2 workers were killed on the picket line. They were shot. Unarmed workers were shot and killed on the picket line, and that whole sort of steel war gets completely, you know,
just totally whitewashed.
But then you have the Steel Museum that has the real history, and you can go in there and you can see, you know, a scrapbook kept by one of the organizers that talks about, you know, what really happened. And the Union leaflets, like the National Guard's intelligence collected all the Union leaflets and all this. You can go to the Ohio Historical Society and you can see their intelligence reports and them making reports saying, oh, this is terrible. You know, they have a leader of the union is an African American. You know, they didn't use that word.
Right.
They used the worst word. And it's wonderful to be able to see that you don't get in that plaque. You know, you get it in the Ohio Historical Society and in the archives.
And seeing that history firsthand.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this last question I've got for you, because I could sit here, you're fascinating. I could sit here and
Okay.
talk with you all day.
Okay.
You know, I've done a number of labor history. I've done the labor history tour. We've done a civil rights tour. You know, we do this stuff with the kids and as part of the program. There are things that I've touched. There are things that I've seen that you go, that's going to stay with me till the day I die. Our civil rights tour, I actually put my hands on the jail cell bars that King was behind when he wrote the letters from the Birmingham jail.
Yeah.
You know, you see those things. Is there anything that you go, you know what? There was this one thing that this is it. Is there one thing?
Well, way back, I had a job way back years ago as a student assistant at the Reuther Library, and I remember I was just as a student retrieving boxes and things, you know, paging stuff, and I remember going through, and all of a sudden I went through an aisle that had a collection of clubs actually from the sit-down strike that had been made during the sit-down strikes in Flint, and they had bands. They would sleep with the clubs attached to their hands to defend themselves in the occupation of the factory. And once, but the hair stood on my end. I saw that and I was like, wow, that really shows the level of dedication that they had, you know, and that's I think one of the things. But there are many.
Yeah, it's hard to narrow down, but you know, for me, it's holding on to those bars that King held on to. I mean.
Yeah, the other thing, I did research on the Little Steel strike I talked about earlier, and I remember coming across congressional hearings, the La Follette hearings on basically the violation of civil liberties, unions' rights, and in there they had x-rays of the workers who had been shot and killed in the Memorial Day Massacre that had all the diagrams of all the bullet holes.
In their back.
In their back. And then you have their video clip, which we're showing here, part of it, that a newsreel that captured that. And those are the things that it shows the sacrifices that, you know, generations before us made. Like, I worked in the steel industry. You know, it was a union job. I made great money. You know, I should have stayed there probably. You know, be retired now. I have a great pension and stuff. But that came out of the Little Steel strike. All those sacrifices. You know, 18 workers being killed on the picket line, and that sacrifice laid the basis for what we have today. And that's why I think labor archives, labor history is so important. And we feel it's really important to bring it right to the unions too, and make particularly the union movement, make it where we're here. You know, if you have historic records, you know, that you need help preserving, you know, we're here, we want to make it accessible, get as much out on the internet as we can, so that people can look at that history and learn from it, and like you say, not repeat the same mistakes, and know when they're being told things that are absolutely false, and to be able to correct that, you know, with that historic record that is really the way to do it, you know, the way to kind of move things forward. It's one of those pieces in the puzzle you need to be able to change society. You know, without the history, you really can't do it. There takes a lot of other ingredients, like all the people today, you know, at the convention here, they're on the front lines. They're doing the day-to-day organizing, and I know they're really busy. So it's hard, you know, maybe to have time to think about history and preserving that, and that's kind of where we come in and can help, you know, so that they can keep doing that frontline battles, and we can be kind of in behind the lines, you know, preserving that history and making it available when they need to take a look back and see what they can learn to then apply it to today, to the battles for today.
That's good stuff, Ben.
Okay,
thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Really appreciate the opportunity.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anything in your past that you remember from grandparents telling tales? I'd love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com, as we continue our coverage here of the AFL-CIO's convention from St. Louis. You know, one of the things they're going to talk about today is healthcare, the idea of single payer. But, you know, a lot of when we talk about healthcare is just, if I get sick, if I fall down and scrape my knee, if my kid falls off my bike, Will I be able to see a doctor? If I get cancer, will I get treatment? I've yet to hear much about mental health issues. What are we going to do going forward with people who are struggling with depression or other mental health issues? And that's why I've asked Sal Rizzoli to come sit down and talk with us. He's the president of the National Union of Healthcare Workers. Sal, thanks for taking time for us.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, you know, I look at this debate on healthcare, and look, we all want to make sure that if our kids fall off the bike and scrape their knee, we get to see a doctor. But you guys are working on this idea of, you know, mental health being part of this, right?
Right. Finally, you know, mental health awareness is increasing, but it's going to take a long time to get rid of the stigma associated with mental health care.
Right.
And if a kid, you know, like comes to school with a broken arm and his arm is in a cast, everybody wants to sign the cast, right? But if a child comes to school with some behavioral health issue that they missed some school for, they're shunned, right? You know, so that number one, we have to get rid of the stigma. You know, there are federal laws that call for parity of mental health care with medical care. They're not enforced.
Right.
It doesn't happen. So, you know, in California, we represent 3,000 psychologists and other mental health clinicians. And, you know, recently had a 5-year battle. These folks work for Kaiser Permanente all over California. A 5-year battle over a contract. And the leading issues was access to mental health care and treatment and enough staffing and in the right place to receive mental health care. And, you know, I'm happy to report that finally Kaiser decided to listen to the people that provide the care. We taught the organization about the shortcomings, and we're now collaborating to make Kaiser Permanente the model mental health care provider. They've hired 800 more clinicians. Yeah, it's exciting. We're also working with Patrick Kennedy on a national level. When he was in Congress, it was his #1 issue. In fact, he authored the federal legislation that calls for parity with mental health care, but it still doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So look forward to working with him to increase advocacy in Congress and in state capitals to progress it and truly achieve parity. You know, I met with him the other day, and he had this. This was his statement. You know, we have to look forward to the day where we never use the term mental health care again. It's simply health care.
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, because you you think of a lot of things, and I think, you know, when I was a kid, you saw people coming back from Vietnam, for instance, and they were broken, and you know they were shunned and left to the side. Now I think we're doing a little bit better job of identifying some things, not as good as we should, not as much as we should, but I guess my question is, as you look at the military and some of the mental problems that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, is it going to make it easier for people who have mental illness or have some problems to maybe not be stigmatized, if that makes any sense?
I think that
because it's a difficult thing to talk about.
It is, and I think the high suicide rate among veterans because of mental health care issues is making it more public, so more people are talking about it. And it's the opioid crisis that, you know, the opioid crisis is a mental health care problem. You know, it's not a drug problem. It's not a law enforcement problem.
How's that?
Well, because people are addicted to opioids, right? It's a mental health care issue, right? It's not a law enforcement issue. And the fact that there's such a high number of suicides, accidental suicides, in Republican congressional districts, rural America.
Right.
It's not the inner cities anymore.
Right, and I've said a number of times.
Issue, right?
Right, I've said a number of times when it was just the urban areas and it was the junkies in the urban areas.
Right.
Nobody cared, but now that it's hit white suburban America, it's now a crisis. You know, and a lot of people are trying to figure out how to stop the pain.
Right. We recently did a Capitol tour where we took our clinicians to DC and met with senators and representatives, Republican and Democrat. Republicans are starting to listen to this because it's affecting their districts.
Right.
So hopefully we'll be able to move it faster.
Well, I hope so, because, you know, you think about healthcare. Healthcare should be a nonpartisan issue. Right. We all want to go to the doctor. We all want to make sure our families are safe and secure. We want to make sure that we don't go bankrupt if we get sick. We want to make sure if we have issues that they're cared for. I mean, at least that's my thought on it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, you guys have done something really very interesting in California. You guys evidently just had a debate, and this, I find this fascinating, and the kind of, you know, almost Athenian democracy that, you know, I like the idea of. You brought all of your delegates and all of your folks to your convention, had the candidates duke it out, and at the end of it, at the very end of it, voted to win your endorsement.
Yep, and actually, before the convention, we spent 3 months doing an educational organizing campaign from Eureka to San Diego in our hospitals and clinics, where members reviewed the comprehensive questionnaire of the 4 leading Democrats. We invited the Republicans, they decided not to come.
Right.
And debated it, and gave preferences to their stewards that came together last Sunday, listened to this 90-minute debate, and then by secret ballot, endorsed, who we hope is the next governor of California, Gavin Newsom.
Right. Why do you think the Republicans didn't come? I mean, I've always been of the mindset, again, healthcare being should be a nonpartisan issue. Why wouldn't their ideas be? Why wouldn't they be willing to come in?
It beats me. Our members, we don't get to choose our members. Our members are whoever our employers hire, and they work in virtually every county in California. Some of our members voted for Donald Trump, right? And about 20% of our members are Republicans. So why they choose not to deal with this is beyond me. You'd have to ask them.
I mean, especially since it's really a unique idea that you're going to come in, we're going to debate it out, and at the end we're going to cast a ballot, and you could walk out with the endorsement.
Certainly possible.
I mean, I would love to see that go even further. But being from California, let me ask you the other side of this, because California was supposed to be that place where single payer was going to happen, much like Vermont. Why hasn't it happened yet?
Well, it is going to happen.
It's going to happen?
It is going to happen.
I love your optimism.
It absolutely is. Well, we've been working on it since the early 90s.
Right.
And we've known since then that, I mean, we're working on a legislative, solution, right? There's a bill in our assembly now. But no matter what happens, even if we pass this in the legislature, it's going to be put on the ballot in California. There's going to be an initiative. Because if we win in the legislature, the insurance companies will put a repeal of it on the ballot in 2020. So it's fundamentally important to do deep education among consumers, the electorate, and that's what's happening. Our coalition is deeper and broader than ever before. Polls are now showing that a majority of Californians, single payer Medicare for all makes sense to them. So I am optimistic and look forward to 2020 when it's on the ballot one way or another and we finally win.
Yeah, I look forward to it as well, because it just seems common sense.
Yeah. One
giant pool. Right. Sal, I appreciate the time. It's really great talking with you.
Yeah, good talking to you, Rick. Thank you.
You never know what you're going to find here at these conventions. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com, as we continue our coverage here from the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis. The other day, we stopped at the grocery store, pick up a couple of things while living in the hotel, and I came across the display of Oreo cookies. And yes, a couple of the guys in the crew wanted cookies. The first thing I did was flip over the bag, because as we've been talking about on the program for a long time, check the label, especially with the Oreo cookie, the billion-dollar cookie. And what did we find? Well, we found this picture of it made in Mexico. And you know what I did? I put the bag right down, which is what I suggest everyone do. And that's why I'm sitting here with Anthony Jackson. Anthony, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you.
Anthony is one of the displaced, fired, left by the curb, the sidelines, Nabisco workers, as Nabisco moved their facility to Mexico, where those cookies come from. You see that bag, I'd be really furious.
When you see that bag, not only should you put it down, but go talk to the store manager. Let him know that it's not okay for them to have that product. Tell them they can talk to the vendors to bring in made in America Nabisco products. Because we have Nabisco plants across the country that still make these products.
Right.
But as long as Mondelez Nabisco, Mondelez being the parent company of Nabisco, as long as they can sell the made in Mexico Nabisco product while exploiting the people in Mexico, they're going to do it. So if we can stop them by not only just not buying it, but also telling the vendors we don't want it, then we can stop this whole process.
So I probably should have gone and talked to the manager, but what I did is I just turned all the bags over. So the first thing you're going to see is that made in Mexico.
Because one of the things we have to do is we have to teach more people. Myself and one of my colleagues, we've been going across the country for the last 18 months trying to educate people more about this plight that we're going through that cost me my job and is in fear of costing a lot of other people their jobs as well. In Chicago, we had 600 people laid off because of this run to the bottom, the corporate run to the bottom, where they're just exploiting people in Mexico and as American workers by taking jobs away from America and taking them down to Mexico where they're paying pennies on the dollar.
Right. You know, one of the things I give you guys ultimate credit for is that a lot of these facilities over the years have closed. I think President Trump says 60,000 manufacturing plants have left this country.
Yes.
You guys have stuck with this. You guys have been out there. You know, every time I turn around, I'm seeing you guys somewhere saying, "Look, this is wrong, and we're going to hold this company accountable." And we, as working people, we as a working class, we have to check the label. We have to use our buying power to punish bad actors and people who are doing this kind of stuff.
Yes, we've worked with a number of groups, the IWJ, the Interfaith Workers for Justice. We've worked with the AFL-CIO. We work with, we want to give you great thanks because you've been one of our biggest supporters in this campaign. But we've been working with a lot of people because, one, there's a tipping point always of where there's a point of no return. And with 60,000 jobs already have left the country off to Mexico, you get close to that point where it'll get to the point where these jobs are going to leave and never come back.
Right.
We understand that, so we have to fight to stop this at this point. If we don't, we'll get to a point where all the jobs are gone and we have homelessness and poverty all over this country.
Well, was that the plan? I mean, you guys have really done a great job of raising awareness. Was the plan to close that plant down? Because look, in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania where I live, Philadelphia was a big Nabisco plant. They've just torn it completely down. It's gone.
Right.
All those jobs gone, those lives ruined. Was that the plan in Chicago?
It wasn't. They never officially said it was the plan, but all signs pointed to them doing the exact same thing they did in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, what they did was they didn't close the plant immediately. They just reduced the.
They bled it dry.
They bled it to the point where they said it wasn't right for them to have just one line run. It wasn't affordable for them to do it, and then they closed the plant. That's what they were trying to do here in Chicago as well. But we've worked hard. We worked with a lot of different, aliases and everything, allies, to work at getting this plant back up and try and get some more work into there and try to repatriate the jobs there.
Yeah, and the other part of this is, as a union, as negotiating contracts for the existing jobs, there's always that fear of, well, we did move those 600 jobs to Mexico. We could take the rest if you ask for too much.
Right.
Or if you ask for anything.
Well, there's a fear of that, but we must be steadfast in our belief that we are doing the right thing. Because we're doing the right thing, we will win in this campaign. I mean, again, like I said, there is a fear of it, but there's more of a fear of not fighting.
Right.
If we don't fight, then we know they'll take the jobs away.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is 60,000 manufacturing plants gone.
Yes,
and the thing is, and I was saying this at the beginning, what would have happened is that first plant that closed, that we had militant workers like you who were going to say, you know what, we're going to hold somebody accountable. And that every time one of these plants closed, the exact same thing happened. And that people were finally aware that, these companies are moving not because they can't make it, but just because they're greedy and they want more.
Right. Well, we want to set an example like that. We want to show that we do have power as workers. For too long, companies have thought of worker as, we have all the power, you just work for us. We do have power as workers.
Right.
We are the ones who make the billions of dollars for those companies. We're not unskilled labor. We're skilled laborers. So they have to see that and acknowledge that, and that's what we're trying to do.
I can tell you in our household, there hasn't been a Mexican-made Oreo in our house, ever. I have made sure of that. My kids, look, I've got an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old. They run, can we get cookies? And first thing they do is they look. And I think that's what we have to do as societally. We have to train our children and train all of us as consumers to be a little smarter on how we spend our money.
I agree. Not only do we need to train them on how to be smarter to spend our money, but I think we need to train them more on the positives of unions as well. If it wasn't for our union, the BCTGM, the Bakers Union, right now we would be under. We would be out without jobs, everybody that's at that plant, instead of just the ones who couldn't get back in right now. Yeah. And we still hope to repatriate those jobs. But if it wasn't for the union, we would all be just up a creek, basically.
And that's the other thing I wanted to get to, because at the end of the day, if you didn't have a union there, no one would have ever heard this story. You guys, everyone would have just gone, and it would have been horrible, but you would have been absorbed into one social program or one crummy job or homeless, or you'd have been gone. Right. Had it not been for being union members and being organized, we may never have heard it, and there'd be Mexican-made Oreos in the Smith household.
I agree. Not only would you have never heard of it, and it wouldn't have just affected Chicago. but the plants in Fairlawn, New Jersey, Richmond, Virginia, Atlanta, Georgia, and also Portland will be on the way going out of the door as well because of this situation. They just said, oh, we could do it in Chicago. Chicago is the largest bakery in the country.
Wow.
So if they could do it to Chicago, they could do it anywhere else.
So let me ask you, last line of questioning, because this is really about people. And there have been still, while you guys have done a good job of keeping as many people as possible, some people still have fallen by the wayside and have lost their jobs. What's happened to those folks? Do we know?
A lot of them have gone back to school, going back for vocational training. Some have worked in other fields where they're making a lot less. They basically have fought, though, still, to hopefully come back one day. They're doing what they have to do to survive, but they're looking to come back. And we're trying to get them back. We're doing things like I said, we've been across the country for the last 18 months. Plus, we have things lined up in the future with going down to Salinas, Mexico with the IWJ, as well as doing a Veterans Day thing on the 9th of November. So we have a lot of things lined up. We want to fight back. We're going to fight back, and we have fought back, and we will continue to fight back.
Please keep us abreast of what's going on. Let us know what's going on. Anthony, I appreciate you taking time for good on you for keeping up the fight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We all do. And it's something I got to tell you, we should all be doing. Anytime a plant closes, the workers should be in the streets, active and continuing to fight so that maybe the next plant doesn't close. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, back here from St. Louis, the AFL-CIO convention. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Here from the AFL-CIO convention in St. Louis. You know, some of the things that they've been talking about here, healthcare, infrastructure, jobs, extremely important. But another one of those issues that has come up is this administration and, well, the attack on immigrants, the attack on people who were brought here because of political asylum, because of turmoil in their countries, disasters. And now you've got an administration who's saying they're not going to renew this temporary status and what it could mean. And I've heard these stories numerous times that people who could be here 20, 30 years could be at risk of being deported and sent back home and their status not being renewed. That's why I'm standing here with Mary Parafit and her interpreter, Rose Metellus Dennis, who is the president of Unite Here Local 355 in Miami. Marie, thanks for taking time for us. So what does this mean to you? When you hear what this administration is doing, what does it mean to you?
Ça veut dire pour ça fait sous l'administration dit il va renouveler TPS.
Là pas renouveler TPS ça là un problème pour moi parce que j'ai 15 ans dans pays depuis m'a travail et là depuis pas ta renouveler li et job là m'a obligé perdu et là m'a bien problème. Les fini m'pas pas retourner dans pays encore parce que me venu ici longtemps, j'ai 15 ans, je suis habitué avec country Miami. Je ne pas senti ma à l'aise pour me tourner la caille à Haïti parce que je n'ai rien encore à Haïti.
It's going to be a big problem for her because she's been living in this country for 15 years and she lost everything that she had back home. If they not renew the TPS, she will lose her job and she pay taxes in the country. She's been a good citizen. She's going to lose everything and she doesn't have any other place to go. And she's already been in the system, like to stay here in the United States. It's going to be a big issue for her.
When did she come to the country?
Qui a noté venu dans le pays?
2002.
2002.
And what brought her here?
Qui s'est mené dans le pays?
J'ai un problème à faire asile politique dans le pays. J'ai un problème politique. Quand j'ai trouvé une possibilité, j'ai un visa, je viens ici, je faire asile là, je suis ici.
She was involved in political in Haiti. She got some issue there. That's why she left the country and to come here to stay here.
So you feared for your life in your home country, and that brought you here.
Yeah, parce que m'te peur les moun a attaquer ou li di ou la fort un bagay qu'on a même so possibilité de venir ici tout camper ici parce que va tourner encore.
She was so scared because the person attacked her in her house and she was afraid for her life. That's why she came here with a visa and she decided she's gonna stay.
So she came here as we hear people, Republicans say, come here the right way. She came the right way, right?
Li di est-ce que vini dans bonne condition.
Ya mde vin nan bon kondisyon, visa mde gen.
Yes, she came with a visa. Yeah, under white condition.
Now, in 2010, there was a huge earthquake, so anything you may have had to go back to is now gone, right?
Ici en 2010, te gon go tremblement de terre, tout sorte gen, est-ce que te perdu tout?
Yeah, paske mde gen maman mat papa yo mouri nan tremblement de terre, lèm fini men mgen kay mwen te krasé a tout yo men.
I lost my dad and my mom in the earthquake, and I have my house, so everything was destroyed there.
So what does it mean? What are you going to go back to? What will your life be like if here you're in this country working hard, paying taxes, doing what you were supposed to be doing, and now they're going to force you to go back to real uncertainty and possible even danger?
Ils ont consacré comment ça pied pour parce que comment on va vivre dans un pays ça on pas habitué avec encore et qui grand pile danger là-dedans comment on va vivre là-dedans comment sentir.
Bon, m'pa ka vivre là-dedans parce que avant tout m'pa connait qui côté m'pa aller à tout kay m'en écraser m'pa même connait qui côté m'pa faire refuge moi l'elle fini même ici depuis m'entrer ici 2002 et depuis 2003 m'commencer à travailler ici pour jusqu'à nos jours.
She said she cannot come back. She doesn't have anything left there. She doesn't know the street now, you know, after 15 years. She doesn't have a place to go to live there. And she's been in this country for 15 years, always working hard and pay her taxes, and she deserves to stay here.
So you're really a person without a country then, if they send you away and they do this.
Li di si yo vo tou nou pa gen ou son moun ki pa gen peyi koto pou ale.
Ba gen peyi parce que peyi ya la même pa kon kote m'po ale.
She said, yeah, this is the country is there, but I don't have any family there. I don't have a house. I don't know where I'm going, where to go.
What can we do to help? What do you want people to know, and what should we be doing to help make sure that you don't get thrown out of our country?
Dijo ki sa ou ta vle moun konnen de ou même, ki so ta vle ke moun fè pou kapaz nan situasyon sa pou yo pa mette de an pays.
Oui, m'nan pays ya marcher sous l'ordre de la loi, m'pa faire ça pas ça, m'a travail, m'gen impression faut président pays ya, faut chef pays yo ouais prend situation nan charge pour ba moi possibilité pour me rester vivre ici parce que m'pa ka tourner la caille encore.
And she said she's been in this country for 15 years, work hard, pay her taxes. She's a good citizen. She never been in trouble with the law. And she deserves for the president and the administration to give her the permit to stay in the country. She doesn't have any other places to go. She asked for support that everybody can support her in order for the president to renew the status and to stay here.
You played by the rules. You did what you were supposed to do. I think at the minimum, we need to help make sure that you're secure here. And talking about the work that you've done, I mean, the fear that I have in going backwards and forcing people back into the shadows is that exploitation and more harm come to you, and I don't want to see that.
Li di ke l pa ta souhaite pou lwe pou moun retourne nan kache ankor, pou moun bral kache, pou al travay, nan travay ki pa pe moun, pou e apre al exploiter moun, li pa ta souhaite ça.
Oui, même tout parce que depuis rentrer ici, je travaille, je paye taxes. Si le président a venu pas bailler un statut égal pour être ici, qu'on a le travail, qu'on a pour tout le temps de travail, on va passer pour grand messie parce que qu'on a on payer au monnaie en bas table, ou pas jamais capable au pays dans le pays, ou pas jamais capable de représenter un dans le pays parce qu'en cachette on va toujours vivre.
And she said she's agree with you because if the president not renewing the status and she has to be undercover, she's gonna have to work, not paying taxes, and for people is gonna exploit her. And she wants to live the American dream that everybody deserves to live here.
Thank you so much for telling us your story.
Okay.
Thank you, and I wish you the best.
Okay.
Merci parce que vous dites histoire, ou les surtout tout bas est passé bien.
Okay. Welcome.
Again, another horrible, horrible story. And at the end of this, it comes down to policy. It comes down to the people that we put into power. And look, contact your representatives, contact your senators. This, not right. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back. Back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Here at the AFL-CIO convention. I'm sitting here with Michael Smith. He's one of the, and I hate saying it, he's one of the folks who lost his job at the Nabisco plant when they decided they were going to up and move Oreo, well, or parts of Oreo down to Mexico. And as we talked about earlier today, check the label. You know, as every time I look at an Oreo bag, actually anytime I look at anything, I want to know where it's made. And I think as consumers, we should be doing that. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having us.
Great seeing you again. Last time I saw you, DNC convention.
DNC convention, yes, sir.
And a lot has changed in the world since then.
Absolutely.
But the one thing that's consistent is you guys are still doing what I think is fantastic work and highlighting the fact that this multinational corporation is taking jobs out of the U.S. and moving them south, and you're making them pay.
Absolutely. We are absolutely educating the consumer, because we truly believe that the consumer and beating this corporate giant at the cash register is the answer to our campaign. And this is what direction we're going in, and we're doing a great job at it, we feel.
No, I mean, I spoke earlier with Anthony Jackson, and he said, look, we're going to keep at this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I said to him, had we done this at the beginning 20 years ago, had we had someone as dogged as you guys with the BCTGM, had we had folks who were out there going to say, you know what, we're going to hold this employer accountable for moving our jobs, maybe we wouldn't be in this place. And maybe by you doing this, you're going to help stop it down the road.
Absolutely. As we have said in some of our videos that we have launched, that the consumer is the answer. Again, in our campaign, we are now working with the Interfaith Worker Justice Movement, going from community to community across this nation, activating churches, and because churches represent communities. And communities and churches represent people that are also consumers. And when we go after the consumer, I believe that we will cause the corporate giants to sit up and pay attention, but more specifically, Mondelez Nabisco.
So as you're out on because you guys have been out on the road, I mean, you're all over the place.
35,000 miles plus.
You're all over the place. What do you when you talk to people, what kind of response do you get? Is it based on politics, where their views are, or do Republicans, Democrats, Independents, do they all get the fact that what's happening to you and what's happened is just flat wrong?
Absolutely, and they're appalled by it. They see the fact that we're looking at a multinational company with an iconic product like the Oreo cookie, and then you want to take something that's totally American and then destroy the very communities that used to produce the product that they're getting rich off of. They're appalled by that, but we must caution our consumers to please check the label. That's hugely important to us, because some of the Oreos are still made in America, but we want all Oreos to be made in America. Those in Salinas, Mexico, we want the jobs that were at 7300 South Kedzie in Chicago to be repatriated and brought back here for the American people to enjoy the iconic cookie made right here on American soil.
Absolutely, and again, it comes back to that piece of Americana. And look, we showed the picture of the bag where you can find made in Mexico.
Absolutely.
And what you should be looking for.
Check the label.
Check the label. But here again, I look at the decision to move to Mexico, and I can only come to one conclusion. Maybe you can help me, or maybe tell me I'm wrong, but it's only about greed. It's only about money. Look, if you were saying we're going to move a portion of the line to feed the Mexican consumer,
absolutely,
that's an argument.
Yes.
But it doesn't seem to be that it at all. It's just we're going to make this stuff in Mexico at much cheaper than we could pay Michael Smith or Anthony Jackson or any of the other hundreds of people who've been thrown to the curb. If you were saying that we could be doing it for them and not bringing it back, I could see an argument.
You can see an argument there, yes.
But I don't feel that here.
Right. They want to use us to manufacture the cookies and use us to purchase the cookies. I mean, only, not to manufacture them the way that we used to. This is about corporate greed. When you think about the multiples of lines that were manufactured for all the Nabisco brands, and then you look at $3.5 billion made on the Oreo cookie alone at its height, down to $2 billion just for one product of the brands that Nabisco Mondelez produces. They were making $2 billion, Rick, off the Oreo alone. There was absolutely no reason to send this production line to Mexico other than greed. That was pure, unadulterated greed that was at the core of Mondelez making this move, and we are standing up as a labor movement and saying this is un-American.
It is un-American, but again, I go back to 2016, and like I said, we met for the last time at the DNC convention. One of the things I keep talking about is, the Trump supporters have a point. Donald Trump had a point. He stole my message. He stole labor's message. He stole the fact that We want manufacturing. He stole the fact that we should be holding Mondelez or Carrier or, you know, name the company who moves out of this country, holding them accountable and responsible. So to me, this could be one of those issues that unites us as a country. You say, no, it's ridiculous that we're going to be making Oreos. Oreos!
Absolutely.
It's like saying we're going to ship mom out of the country.
Absolutely, or apple pie out of America. It you know, it lends credence to the same mantra. You know, Oreos should be made where they originated at, right here in the United States of America, supporting communities and supporting jobs, sustaining income and wages and pensions, so that America can continue to be the country that it is.
Now let me ask you this, and I asked Anthony Jackson this question earlier. You know, there are a lot of people who lost their jobs here.
Yes, sir.
This is a human thing.
Yes, sir.
You know, you've had friends who lost their jobs.
Single moms, single parents, caretakers. It was a horrible time for us at 3 a.m. in the morning when they chose to ship the first segment of the jobs down to Salinas, Mexico. It was a time that I will never forget.
3 a.m. in the morning?
3 a.m. in the morning. I was a third shifter. I worked third shift from 11 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning. My brother Anthony Jackson was a mixer. I was a production line operator, and to see the horror and the anguish and just the pain on the faces of women that were heads of households, that were supporting households as a single parent, and caretakers and fathers with children that, you know, were just single income households. So it was even myself was a single income household. So it was a very painstaking situation that we were up against. Very much.
So think about that the next time you buy an Oreo cookie and you don't check the bag. Flip it over, make sure it's made here. Because look, at the end of the day, these jobs are really people.
Yes, sir. The jobs represent people in communities across the nation. They represent the 7 bakeries that still exist under the Mondelez flag, and we feel that we deserve better.
So let me ask you a last line of questioning, because, you know, this has happened, and I know you want to bring those jobs back. My fear is that this emboldens them to do more. That maybe the rest of the jobs at the Chicago bakery, maybe some of the other ones go, like they did in Philadelphia, where they just recently tore down the Nabisco plant.
We saw the tower coming down, yes.
You know, my fear is in this country we become only a country of consumers, but consumers with no money, because we don't have jobs.
Yes.
Do you see the company moving towards more outsourcing, or do you think what you're doing is making them think twice?
We believe wholeheartedly that we are causing the corporate America community to think very, very seriously about offshoring jobs again, and we are not going to stop. We are not planning, Rick, to go away. We are planning to be and do and stay in this fight as long as feasibly possible.
Michael Smith, good talking to you, man.
Rick,
thank you.
Always
Keep
a
up
pleasure,
the fight.
brother.
I look forward to seeing you again real soon.
Thank you.
Going to take a quick break right back here from the AFL-CIO convention. Stick around.
Thank you.
Well, I got to tell you, you know, you look at that story of both Anthony Jackson and their Michael Smith, and it's really mind-blowing to me that, well, we haven't done this as a working class as effectively in the past. Good on the BCTGM, good on Michael, good on Anthony for really holding accountable this employer. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Did you like our coverage of the AFL-CIO's convention? You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell us what you think, what we did right, what we did wrong, and what you think the future is going to bring. Look, together we can stand, together we can fight, together we can move this country forward, and really, honestly and truthfully, make a better opportunity for our children and our grandchildren, much like our great-grandparents did for us. Honestly and truthfully, we've got work to do. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1785. That was the day the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York was founded. 22 skilled craftsmen with the motto, "By hammer in hand, all arts do stand," met on Pine Street to form a benevolent organization that could provide culture, education, and social services to craftsmen and their families. 2 months later, founders met for their annual meeting. They represented many of the city's trades, including hatters, butchers, sailmakers, bolters, and comb makers. In his book, Chance Democratic, historian Sean Willett states, The General Society was intended to be a semi-political umbrella organization for all of the city's independent mechanics to help oversee the trades and secure favorable legislation from local and national government. The group captured the ideal of mutuality and craft pride essential to artisan fraternities since the Middle Ages. The General Society opened one of the city's first free schools at a time when there were no public schools. It established a tuition-free Mechanics Institute, the General Society Library, and lecture series. The Mechanics Institute, founded in 1858, continues to provide free evening trades-related instruction. The library, established in 1820, is the second oldest library in New York City. It is also one of the few remaining membership-circulated libraries. Its collections and archives span 2 centuries. The General Society continues its tradition of public lectures in the form of the Labor, Literature, and Landmark series. More recently, it has added the Artesian Lecture series that features lectures by master artisans. The series also promotes the work and art of skilled craftsmen. The General Society has been at its current location at 20 West 44th Street since 1885.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for tuning in. This hour, we're going to be talking to you about issues that came up during the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis this past week. Look, working people have been under attack like no other time in our history. Right now, a unified labor movement is so important to help rebuild what's left of the middle class. So in this hour, we're going to talk about, one, all of the wonderful things that we've seen labor do in Puerto Rico and the relief effort as, well, you know, folks took time out from their lives to go and help, like union members do. Look, the reality is not looking for congratulations, not looking for recognition, but they should be recognized. So we're going to talk about some of that, the disaster relief, what's happened, what hasn't, some of the on-the-ground stories, but also we're going to talk about, you know, union members running for political office. And we're going to talk to a guy who is doing just that. The reality is, in this world, we need to have a strong, unified labor movement to make sure that people have a fair shot. This convention, to me, is one of those opportunities to talk about issues that really do affect workers every day. And as the Supreme Court moves forward in their attack on workers, it's going to take us, all of us, united, to come back around together. So I'd love to hear your thoughts as we go forward. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Love to hear your thoughts. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show, our coverage of the AFL-CIO's convention here in St. Louis. And whenever I'm in St. Louis, I have to hit up my friend Roy Gillespie, who is the master of disaster in my union, the Teamsters Union. Wherever there's trouble, wherever there's a disaster, a hurricane, something happens, Roy is there with the relief effort for the Teamsters and their members. Roy, thanks for taking time for us.
Good seeing you again,
Good
Rick.
to see you again.
The only thing about it is, don't say that I'm always there when there's a disaster. Then people will say, well, I got to stay away from him because he starts it.
No, you're there in the aftermath. You're the guy who helps clean all this mess up, and you've been doing this for years.
I've been doing it for 25 years as far as the disaster is concerned.
Wow. And you've seen it all.
Virtually, yeah. Yeah, I've been in hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, wildfires, you name it, I've been out there.
So is business getting better or worse?
It's actually getting worse. This year has been a very hectic year with floods and floods in Louisiana, hurricane in in Texas and Florida, the massive hurricane that hit Puerto Rico, and just got back from Puerto Rico and going back tomorrow.
Yeah, you spent a good bit of time there. One of the things that, as a Teamster, and I got to ask this because the right-wing blogosphere, the right-wing media was echoing this story that because of this disaster, the Teamsters were there on strike, striking for higher wages, basically holding the people of Puerto Rico hostage to deliver the relief effort. Is there any truth to that whatsoever?
The truth of it is I'm a Teamster. The rest of it is bull. I'd like to say another word, but it's bull. Teamsters were never on strike. The problem what happened in Puerto Rico with moving goods out is twofold. Number one, a lot of the drivers were not able to get there because of roads, no communication, and also, like anybody else, you're going to take care of your family first before you go to work. You're going to make sure that they're safe, they have shelter, they have food, and they're able to move around. And that was a problem. The second problem, which was the biggest problem, was, say for instance, you have ABC grocery stores, and they have 100 grocery stores there. Well, only 2 of them are open, but goods were already in transit there. So these trailers and stuff are sitting on the yards that are coming in off these ships, and ABC grocery stores are saying, whoa, we only have room for 2 stores that are open. You're going to have to hold the goods for others. And then you have other businesses that are closed. So all the stuff that was already in transit, they were supposed to get out to the community and into the infrastructure, was being held because you can't move it out. No customer wants a truckload of meat if they don't have electricity to put it in the store.
That's a good point.
Furniture stores are going, we don't want the furniture right now because we don't have electricity and no one's coming to buy it. So you have tons and tons and tons of goods that are trapped on the docks, in the facilities there, and not able to move into the infrastructure.
Because you even had President Trump echo that we need truck drivers. We need those truck drivers. And look, the Teamsters, along with the AFL-CIO, brought a bunch of truck drivers in. I signed up to volunteer to go as well. You know, so there was some need, obviously, but you know, not to the extent that I think that it was made out to be.
Well, when we got there, I went down on a flight that was sponsored by the AFL-CIO,
right,
and it was 327 people that went down on this flight. Well, when we went down there, we thought that we would have to drive trucks and stuff. But guess what? The truck drivers had started to return. They were trying to get back to work, and they were out there moving the goods to the areas. Our need wasn't, the need for us to do that wasn't there. So we basically started doing the heavy lifting for the American Red Cross and going out into the areas where most people wouldn't drive through, but because you're professional truck drivers and professional haulers, you knew how to get into these areas.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and again, that's a story we don't hear. And as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the union efforts, a lot of the Teamsters and the AFL-CIO unions, they were some of the first people on the ground, right?
Yes, yes, and we went out into the community, and some communities hadn't seen anybody until we got there. We had a bunch of nurses from RN, which is a voluntary organization, and they went out into the areas and they found people that hadn't received water or food in a while. And they were able to relay it back to us, and we sent the American Red Cross and trucks out there the next day. So yeah. It is so, Rick, is so massive, the response. Now, here in the United States, if we have a disaster like that, we've got Teamster truck drivers and the other companies that would flood into there. You can't flood from Miami to Puerto Rico and drive.
Good point.
And
so Trump's right. It is an island in a big ocean.
Correct. It is.
I'm not quite sure he knows where it is, but even still. But you know, but here's the thing, and this is where I keep coming back.
He does know where it is. He had a golf course there.
I'm with you there. All right. So, but you know, but I look at this, and you know, from what I've seen, and look, you were on the ground, and I hope you'll explain just how bad things are there. We're talking total devastation.
Well,
you know, telephone poles snapped in half. You know, communication lines down, power down. How well? Let me say, how bad is it?
Over 40,000. A guy from the power company told me he had over 40,000 poles broken. That's a lot of poles broken. And they were able to put up 7 a day. And so
7 a day.
7
You need
a day.
40,000. So is there a plan to get those other 39,993 done tomorrow?
Well, electric is supposed to be back on by November 1st, according to some people. I don't know which November the 1st. They didn't say November 1st, 2017, but they said it'd be November 1st.
Well, what do you say to the person like President Trump has said, you know, they were in bad shape to begin with. The infrastructure wasn't great. This just made it worse.
Still the United States of America. Americans take care of Americans first.
And that's, to me, that's the message that should come out of this all the way around. I mean, maybe this is a bridge too far, but I actually don't know that our president knew that that was part of the country. And I, just from the initial response, and I struggle with that.
Well, one good thing for him, most Puerto Ricans, when I left, it was 93% didn't have electricity. So you didn't have television.
They didn't see it.
They didn't see it. So I'm sure they would be enraged about it. But most people aren't worrying about what the president says. They just need food and water.
They need food and water.
Police officer told me that you can hold $1,000 in this hand and a bottle of water in this hand, and somebody would rob you for the bottle of water before the,
it's that
the money.
Desperate.
Because if you had the $1,000, you couldn't buy water.
So are we seeing things get better? I mean, you know, I want to think that, you know, our efforts are making things better. Are we getting better quickly, or how long do you see this process playing out?
Well, some people will tell you that they'll be up and running by November. I think the resort areas will be up and running by November because they have generators and some power in those areas. They didn't have the lines that are up in the air. Theirs were underground, so they will still have power. The outer areas where people live, it's going to take years. I saw poles broken with wires wrapped around, and you have to cut them all loose because you couldn't tell which one you met. Imagine taking about 10 shoestrings and balling them all up together. It's going to take a while to take them loose. Yeah. And that's what's happening there.
Now, my hope is out of this comes an opportunity to say, you know, these storms are getting more frequent. They're getting more powerful, more dangerous, more destructive. That maybe we start building in a way that, you know, takes that into account. That maybe we use this disaster and all of this suffering and all of this into a positive direction, so that the next one that comes and the next one that comes doesn't create this kind of damage.
Well, I think that what we need to do with on the union side is put together a disaster team, which basically plans for this, so when it happens, there are more people like me that know how to handle a disaster, that can get out there and work with the different agencies like the American Red Cross, Salvation Army, Catholic Charities, and many more, and work together in getting the resources out there. You got to realize in the American Red Cross and Salvation Army, it's mostly volunteers. So when you have a disaster and these volunteers come out there, they're not experts in driving trucks.
Yeah, they're good-hearted people, but
they're good-hearted people. We went in the floods in Cedar Rapids. They had a gigantic warehouse, and they had 20 Red Cross volunteers in there, and they were trying to move stuff around and pushing it around on the two-wheeler and stuff. And we walked in there and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, we're moving this stuff off this truck." "No, you use a forklift."
Nobody knew how to do it.
So we, through the local up there, we brought in 7 Teamsters, and we unloaded the trucks, and we just let them sit down, and we bought them some Domino's pizzas and soda pop and told them just watch, and we unloaded them. So that's what you need to do, and we have an MOU with the American Red Cross that when they need experts or people in transportation or stuff, they are immediately bring a Teamster or somebody from AFL-CIO, boom, they're in there, and they don't have to wait 2 or 3 days for background checks and everything. They immediately get in there and get to work.
What's an MOU?
Memo of understanding.
Okay, so you've got this good relationship. So let me ask you kind of the last line of questioning, because you know, you look at this devastation. and you look at the response, in your opinion, did what happened in Puerto Rico, was the government response what you would hope to see? Are we playing this? Because you know what I keep seeing coming back is there's all this government red tape, there's all this bad government, there's all of these obstacles that good-hearted people can't go do this work. The rules are killing us and tying our hands. It's government that's bad. And I'm curious, as someone who is on the ground, did you see that? Did you see that kind of scenario?
I can't say I did, and for the simple reason, my job was specific: get in there and help the people. I didn't care about politics, politicians, or government stuff. I still did the rules and regulations, but it was about helping the people.
Right.
And that was my marching orders, and that's what I normally do. It was going out to help the people compared to worried about what this mayor thought, or this mayor, or what this governor thought, or what the president thought, or what this congressman. It was to get resources and get it to the people, and that is what we do as union people.
Yeah. Now you're going back, I understand, tomorrow, right?
I'm going back tomorrow. I'm taking a flight out of here and flying back to San Juan.
Good for you. The best way for me to help, the best way for our listeners, our viewers to help, volunteer, jump on a plane, go, or send money, what?
All the above. They're desperately needing resources down there, water, because the water plants are down. They might be up by now, but most of them are down. If you're a union person, check with your local union. Most of them have funds that are going on. AFL-CIO, I know, has a fund. The Teamsters Disaster Relief Fund goes strictly to 901, which is the Teamsters local down there, and many of their members are affected. Many of members, they don't have electricity. So I saw things like 6-block long lines for a bag of ice, and people standing out there for water, 2 or 3 blocks long of water, and it was just a long line.
And that level of desperation, I can't even fathom.
It's pretty bad when you see that. That's one other reason why I'm going back.
And we haven't seen rioting or any real
desperation. No, went to a town called Dorado, and I was there with the Red Cross, and we were passing out water and stuff. And the most touching part of it is there were some little girls that the mother dressed them up in real nice, pretty party dresses, and they came out. They couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old, and they hadn't had any water or food for 5 days. We were the first people to see them, and I was able to give them water and food, and I gave a little girl a bottle of water, and she started crying. And I asked the person who was with me interpreting, because I speak English and bad English, not Spanish. And I said,
share that.
Yes, and I said, why is she crying? Did I do something wrong? And she says, no, she just hadn't had anything to eat and drink in 5 days. And I felt real bad about that. And the little girl hugged my leg. I said, okay, what did she say now? She says, I love you. And that was very touching to me. That was a very touching situation. And I felt that you're doing some good when you can make at least one person happy. And we made a lot of people happy, thanks to the AFL-CIO, and especially the Teamsters for sending us down there.
Yeah, Roy, I know you do an awful lot of good on the work you do, and please be safe, be safe down there, and please keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, sir.
Our good friend Roy Gillespie. We'd love to hear your thoughts and how you can help. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Welcome back to our coverage of the AFL-CIO's convention here in St. Louis. I'm sitting here with Pablo De Leon. He is the senior field rep for the AFL-CIO, one of the folks on the ground in Puerto Rico recently, doing a lot of the important work in helping with the disaster. Pablo, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me here.
So, just to start, how bad are things on the ground right now?
Well, the reality is that, the whole island is devastated by, everything that happened. So it was not just a wind type of hurricane, it was wind and rain, and compiled with, already, infrastructure that was that needed some help, and really complicated the situation there. So we talk about no power, no water, You know, a lot of people without now, you know, work because there's, you know, can't go back to work because there's no electricity. So it's a really tough situation that we're living in Puerto Rico right now.
Yeah, major crisis. You know, one of the things that my wife has talked about is, you know, she had seen this story, and we're seeing all kinds of tragic stories, you see, I often wonder what we see on the mainstream media, if it's just not sensationalized one way or another. But the hospital situation, you had President Trump say that, you know, the majority of hospitals were open within a couple of days, and we find out that they really weren't. We know that I guess there's a hospital ship offshore, but then you hear stories of you can't get sick patients to that. Explain to me the situation there, if you have any idea.
So we did quite a bit of work with some of the hospitals. We actually helped, you know, get some power generators started and set up. We also had some incidents where the power generators fell, you know, in some of the hospitals, and we had to get our nurses and doctors going as an emergency around, you know, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning to move some ICU patients to a different hospital that actually had, you know, a power generator in the areas that they needed. So the other thing is that we experienced, you know, the issue with the USNS ship, the Compassion, because one of our nurses got sick, and we actually had to move her into the ship there. And the reality is that, you know, they have empty beds right now. They're really not taking care of the people. They're not taking those that actually need. And the few hospitals that are operating because they have power generators are, you know, overloaded with people coming in because it's just not enough.
So is that, you said there are empty beds on the ship. Yeah. You know, is that a red tape issue? Is that a logistic issue? Because look, you want to try and help where you can, and you know, and you want to know, you know, kind of really what's going on.
So we got a lot of back and forward, and I think that has to do with the red tape. In some instances, that we're saying, well, the doctor that's seeing the patient has to very clearly state that they don't have the means or in order to continue to treat the patient. You know, that's what we were hearing from the ship, and then on the other hand, we were hearing from the doctors, oh, you know, they have to initiate the process in order for us to, you know, release the patient. So it wasn't clear exactly whose responsibility was to take over, and the reality is, in the meantime, time is going by, and the patients are getting sick and they're getting worse. So, you know, something needs to happen in order to, you know, streamline that process.
It takes some leadership.
Absolutely.
And I fear we lack a lot of that, especially coming from Washington. Now, you guys were right at the front end of this. I mean, you know, even before FEMA, I think, was gathering their bags together, you know, labor was right there front and center. We talked to my friend Roy Gillespie, who, you know, this is what unions do, but I would argue they do it without anybody giving them any credit for it. Not that you're asking for it, but it would be nice to be recognized.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that everybody, you know, it's good for us to show the work that we're doing. I know for a fact that all the volunteers that we had there, 300 plus, 330 I think at one point, they were doing it because they wanted to help, right? But they understand also that, you know, it's good for us to, for others to know and understand, you know, the work that is done there. But I think also more important is to understand the reality of what's happening, how much more help do they need? Because what we were able to do within those 2 weeks was sort of like a drop in the bucket in terms of, you know, the need of the island, right? And we definitely, every single health brigade that we sent, and every single visit that we did, you know, the folks on the island were saying, you are the first ones that actually come in here, you know. So we didn't just limit ourselves to providing, you know, health service, but, you know, we were providing water, we were providing food, and I think even more important, we're providing education, because the reality is that there's an unlimited amount of water, bottled water, to give to everyone. So we have to teach the people in Puerto Rico how to sanitize the water that they can actually get and make it drinkable water. Right. So we had information about how to use, you know, just bleach, regular bleach, in order to disinfect the water and make it safe to drink. But also we had some training about how to get rid of and remediate mold, because that is the other issue that they were having, right? Because they have no roofs, and the water and the conditions, you know, just, you know, make it even worse. So
that was one of the things that I saw right after Katrina. We had gone down and we'd seen the houses, and I don't know how it is there, but on the houses after Hurricane Katrina, they had the markings on the door where firemen had come through, and if they had found any people who had perished, or they'd found any pets or anything, they had it written right on the door. So as you drove by, you kind of saw the stats, and it was really horrible. But in the houses, the mold had just taken over, because, you know, you put water in houses, in wood, in anything, that's going to take over. So just that remediation process alone, it's got to be daunting.
It is daunting, and the other thing is that, you know, people are so eager to cover the roofs for the tarp, but what you're doing is creating the perfect environment for mold to continue to grow, right? If you don't do it right. So we wanted to make sure that they had not just the tools on how to install their tarps, but also how to remediate the mold and take care of both things. The reality is that, you know, different than what happened in New Orleans and Louisiana, they haven't been anybody going door to door and checking on people and making sure that there's areas that are completely disconnected, that breaches that are still down, that have been no effort whatsoever to build some sort of temporary bridge in order for those communities to be connected again. And, you know, the residents, they just basically have to figure out a way, so set up cables to be able to pass goods, you know, back and forward. But there's a lot of areas that are still, you know, disconnected from, you know, from the rest of the island and the help.
What's the next step? I mean, obviously this is going to be months, probably years-long process. What's the next step with your involvement?
Well, I mean, we just passed a resolution here at the convention, and basically, you know, once again, bringing the message of what the real need is, putting pressure in D.C. and the Capitol to ensure that they give the help that is necessary, and that this is not just a show or just a politics, because the reality is that this is a humanitarian effort and a humanitarian crisis, and you need to put the politics aside in order to, you know, look at the residents there and look at them as human beings and provide the help that is necessary. We have the resources in terms of a country. We're not applying those resources. We're not doing what it takes to do that. So that will be like phase one or phase two of the work that we're doing. Phase three will probably be, you know, looking at how we can continue to establish a structure where we can have teams come in and continue to provide help, you know, whether it, you know, with our unions that have nurses and doctors, our unions of the building trades and transportation. We want to make sure that we continue to provide help to the citizens there of the
Let me ask you this, because you said about the resources, and one of the things that's been really concerning to me is how long it seems to have taken for our government to come forward.
Yeah.
I mean, is this a situation, and this is, I think, probably an opinion thing, maybe outside of your pay grade, but it seems to me that, you know, this being Puerto Rico, I don't know that we would have tolerated this in Texas or in Louisiana or other places. I'm curious your thought.
My personal thought is, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that I don't know what the end game is or what they're trying to accomplish, but yeah, they have been way too slow in terms of, you know, the real help. Interestingly enough, I was part of a meeting where we had the deputy director of the Homeland Security, and we couldn't get him to commit to a pallet of water, you know, to bring into you know, the area. So I think that there's a real disconnect of what the reality is and the real needs. And like I said, I don't know if it continues to be, you know, some sort of political game or what they're trying to do, but this desperate need that needs to be given to the island of Puerto Rico.
My problem has always been we elect politicians who don't believe in government. We elect politicians who say we're going to restrain and constrict what government's able to do, and then we act surprised when they don't respond in a timely fashion or well enough, in my view. I mean, it's just one of those things. So, you know, last line of questioning that I wanted to get into you with, you know, you've seen what's going on the ground.
Yeah.
As a human being, when you see this, when you look into the eyes of children, when you look into the eyes of these families who are, in all intents and purposes, desperate, what do you feel? What do you think?
Well, Phil, I mean, it hits you really deep, right? It makes you humble and appreciate what you have. I think that you have a different sense of appreciation for everything that we have, and, you know, air conditioning, electricity, and, you know, running water and all those things, right? But I think it also teaches you a lesson, right? Because people there are so grateful, and we met so many of them that were willing to work with us and do so many things, and then come back the next day, but they were going home knowing that they were going to go to a place with no electricity, with no water, and very little food, and having their own issues, but they were there, you know, making sure that they were helping not just themselves, but everybody else within the island. And I think that that's something to be said that we don't see enough. They're resilient, they're strong people, and we need to be there for them. And they're U.S. citizens at the end of the day. You know, they're just the same as we are, and we need to do the right thing for the island.
Any one story did you just grab onto that just...
Yeah, and I guess this is more of a, you know, we were actually housed at, you know, one of the stadiums there, and, you know, the staff that was working there with us, I mean, they did everything to make us as comfortable as possible, knowing that at the end of the day, you know, their house had been flooded because one of the managers live in Louisa, which is one of the areas that has been very prompt from flooding, and we had constant raining. You know, while we were there was days that rained, you know, the whole day, a lot of rain, And knowing that, you know, she came to work and her house was flooded again, you know, for the second, third time, without really having anything to do. But she was there with us, helping make sure that we had everything that we needed in order to get our volunteers out to help other folks. And I think that says a lot about the people of Puerto Rico. Yeah,
good
for sure.
stuff. Pablo, I appreciate the time. Thank you for the work you do. Keep up the great work. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell us what you think, and well, find out how you can help. I say the best way is send a couple of dollars to your favorite relief aid program. Quick break, right back here from the AFL-CIO convention in St. Louis. To the Rick Smith Show, our coverage of the AFL-CIO's convention here in St. Louis. I'm sitting here with Louis Wren. He's the head of the AFL-CIO in Louisiana. Louis, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you. Enjoyed being here with you this morning.
What do you think of this event?
It's impressive. Anytime, you know, I'm from a southern state, and having this kind of union participation around you energizes you and encourages you.
That's good stuff.
Yes.
You know, I look at some of the things that are facing labor. You know, the Janus versus AFSCME case, which is going to make, you know, basically right to work for across the country for public sector workers. You know, in a state like yours, you kind of have a little bit of understanding what that might look like.
Well, actually, we've been right to work since 1976. We don't have fair share. We've recently, and we've done it for the last 10 years, but we've had a fight over payroll deduction and whether employees would voluntarily be allowed to have their union dues deducted. A couple years ago, it actually got out of committee, and that was a big fight, and we beat it back. So we're really proud of that.
In my view, that's the next fight after this, because Janus isn't the end of it.
Yeah,
there's going to be tons of this stuff.
What's so disheartening, and I've debated the Right to Work committee before, and it's like, just tell the truth. Don't tell me you're out here interested in workers' rights, because this is your only issue.
Right.
And you're not funded by workers, you're funded by corporations. I guess the thing that bothers me the most is their hypocrisy about it. Look, you want to weaken the voice of working people. Their union is their voice in politics, in legislative matters, and in the workplace. But just be honest about it. That's what you want to do.
Yeah.
Don't disguise it as something else.
So they do a good job of disguising, don't they?
It's
always about something else.
So. I mean, what a misleading name. Right to Work doesn't give anybody the right to work. All it does, and actually, the lead guy who promoted Right to Work in Louisiana represented what was called LABI, Louisiana Association of Business and Industry. Came out years later and said that it was misleading. All it managed to do was hold down wages in the state, didn't produce any jobs, and he, as the main promoter of it, admitted that it was the wrong way to go in Louisiana.
Wow.
Of course, at that time, he was retired, and LABI said he was senile by then because he didn't agree with them.
Yeah, he wasn't on that payroll anymore.
Yes.
You know, but when we think of Louisiana, you know, I think of, you know, New Orleans. We were down there a couple of times after the hurricane. You look at what's going on in Puerto Rico. There seems to me, and you can agree or disagree, it seems to me that there's just some parallels there.
Well, there are some parallels, but they may be for different reasons. I saw Katrina. A lot of the response was based on politics. New Orleans was a Democratic stronghold.
Right.
And I think there was some plans to try and break that Democratic stronghold. A lot of that is going on in Puerto Rico about, you see the mayor disagreeing with the president and the name calling back and forth. And, you know, that's ridiculous when people are suffering. I adopted an attitude after Katrina. There's two kind of people in the world. There's union members and there's potential union members, and we're going to help both of them.
Yeah.
You know, the thing that probably amazes me the most, we've been through Katrina and Gustav and Rita and Ike and 4 or 5 more hurricanes that I can't remember the names. We've been through 2 rounds of floods. Several tornadoes have hit. But to see the brotherhood and the compassion that our members not only have for their brothers and sisters in the labor movement, but their whole community.
Yeah, their neighbors. And
you know, we got a little bit of the hurricane that hit Texas in Lake Charles, and I went over there one day. They had probably 50 or 60 union members. Worked with a small church out there, identified some homes that needed to be gutted, and those people didn't have the resources, and they spent days just going in and helping the people.
Yeah, I remember that when we had gone after Katrina hit, and the number of union members that we had seen you know, just giving of their craft and going, volunteering to help rebuild homes. It was one of those things where you go, yeah, I'm proud to be a union member.
It is, and you know, there are some horror stories, and I tell everybody, for every horror story I know, I can give you 10 stories of how proud I am of union members that I would have never suspected, who just were around the clock. I mean, we were working 16-hour days, never complained. Who can I go help next? I got tickled. I was with the Red Cross after one storm, and the guy said, "You didn't tell me you were president of the AFL-CIO." I said, "Dude, I don't think somebody who's thirsty cares what my title is. They just want a bottle of water."
Yeah.
That's just what we're here for.
And you know, I get that from so many union people, because look, unions do a lot of work in the community. When there's a disaster, they're the first one to rush into a burning building or to a hurricane, and yet they never. And maybe it's your fault, because you don't toot your own horn. You don't say, "Hey, look what we're doing." You just go and do it.
It's actually a conversation I had. When a disaster first happens, first people you want to go find are the firemen.
Right.
They are the best organized, the best at relief you've ever seen. I told the government one time, I said, "Y'all make a plan, and you get 2 blocks down the street and there's a tree. Y'all all come back and plan for 2 days." The firemen drive around the corner, go take care of the mission, come back and change the plan afterwards, or move the tree. But that was the problem. I said, everybody in this public thinks the fire department is helping them. Every one of you is not working for the fire department right now. You're on your own time, and you need to wear a shirt that says your firefighters union is here to help you, not the fire department.
Good point.
But everybody's so busy helping, they just really don't think about
the messaging.
Yeah,
because I remember
it's not about taking credit.
Yeah, I get that, but I think of the corporate interests, and I think of a large retail chain, from somewhere in Arkansas, who evidently, and this is one of those really funny stories, sent like $8 million of water to Louisiana, but spent $18 million promoting the fact that they sent $8 million worth of water.
Yep.
And labor doesn't do that. And
No,
not that I want them to. And I think
it's quite a difficult challenge. Like I said, most of these people, they just care about their brothers and sisters, they care about their community, and they don't think about it. But it is an opportunity to tell the public. I will tell you that we had bought brooms and mops to send to Beaumont and Orange and stuff. And I said, we need to put a label on here. This is donated by the Louisiana AFL-CIO and UA Local 188. And I'm going to tell you, it bothered me to do it. But one of my guys was down there, and somebody flagged him down and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "We came to bring some supplies." "Oh." He said, "And I'm with the union." He said, "That's even better. Thank you for being here." So I guess if we don't tell them, they don't know.
Right.
And that's part of what I guess we need to, we do a lot of things in the community, from training to working with different organizations to, our deal is that every worker should be treated with dignity and respect, whether they got a union book in their pocket or not.
Absolutely.
They should be paid fairly. They should be treated with dignity and respect. And we'll fight for a group of workers who are not union members. We go to the legislature and we demand a workers' comp system that says if you get hurt on the job, you should be able to choose which doctor you go to. You should be compensated for your medical bills. In Louisiana, we gave up the ability to go to court and sue over workers' comp industry for that. And we champion those causes. Not just union members get those benefits.
Right.
Every worker gets those benefits.
No, I mean, the old concept of an injury to one is an injury to all, regardless of what card you're carrying. Let me ask you this. You've been through all of these hurricanes, and you've seen Katrina, you've seen the disaster, and how long Katrina took for it to come back. When you look at Puerto Rico, what's your sense of the response, and two, what's your sense of how long is it going to take for the folks there to return to some bit of normalcy?
Well, I guess the first thing is how disappointing it is that the President of the United States doesn't even realize that those are American citizens. That makes me question how well the response is going to be. On top of the unique challenges, I had one of my locals, they called and said, "Look, we're going to rent a ship, we're going to get containers, we're going to put supplies in there." I said, "That's great. What are you going to do with them?" "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, is there somebody to unload them off the ship when you get there? Is there somebody who can transport them?" So just the unique challenges of it being an island,
right, and
the access to the island and the infrastructure that's down and was suffering before the storm, it is going to be a long battle.
Yeah, but is that an excuse?
Even in Texas, with all of the flooding, that doesn't go away in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We have people in Louisiana from the 2016 flood who are still living in FEMA trailers, who have not been able to get back in their house. Luckily, Congress has appropriated not enough money, but some money, but just getting the people and the coordination of getting the benefits. And then when you get the workers, all of a sudden now you've got disasters in Florida, Texas, and in Puerto Rico. Now you're stretching the workforce to who can repair those things. So they're going to be, like I said, Puerto Rico has such unique challenges in that I haven't seen the great government support from the federal government. Hopefully they'll step up. The challenge of being an island, and they're going to compete with resources with Florida and Texas.
Yeah, but the president said FEMA's doing a great job. Everything's tremendous. It's wonderful. It's great.
George Bush said the same thing after Katrina in New Orleans.
Well, there is that.
So don't be surprised.
There's no surprise here. And, to me, I look at this and it seems to me that these being people of color, that there's another layer to this delay in my view. I could be wrong, but I look at this and if this were Greenwich, Connecticut, I think we'd be responding a lot faster.
Well, I mean, to some degree, you can see the difference in the response to Sandy in the Northeast versus Louisiana in the South. Government concerns about where the votes are, and when you look at the Northeast and the concentration of the population, I think their response was probably faster and better than we've ever seen in the South.
But in this administration, Louisiana actually voted for Trump.
I'm not sure there is an administration.
There is that. But you had told me an interesting story that your governor, who is a Democrat, was having conversations with Donald Trump. You want to share that?
Well, it was amazing. He said that the conversations with HUD, with the head of FEMA, were very productive, that they were trying very hard to be accommodated. We've had some challenges. For example, there's a government rule that if you apply for and you're eligible for a small business loan, then even if you don't take it, when the disaster relief comes in, you're not allowed to take it because of duplication of service, even though you didn't get it. Another thing, and we're hoping that we can take care of, was after Katrina, people take a loss, immediately on their taxes to get a little money to sustain themselves. When relief does come in, and it just hits them out of the blue, the IRS comes back 2 years later and says, by the way, you got reimbursed for your loss, now you owe us tax dollars back.
Wow.
And those kind of challenges, but he was amazed. I don't know how much he wants me to share of his conversations with the president, but he said they were mostly limited to discussions of the president.
And we don't even need to know anything beyond. It's all about him.
I don't think anybody would be surprised.
So let me ask you, last line of questioning. The AFL-CIO here, as part of their resolutions, passed a resolution to help humanitarian aid to Puerto Rico, things that they've done in the past. What do you hope comes out of this convention?
Well, as far as relief, I have to tell you that whether there's a resolution or not, and I've had people from Texas and Miami saying, thank you for helping us. I said, dude, this is what we do.
Right.
I've been the beneficiary of people from across this country, particularly within the labor movement, saying, what can we do to help? And so I think you're going to see the locals and the union members from across this country do what they always do. They're going to step up and do everything they can, whether it's financial, whether it's manpower, whether it's supplies. Like I said, they're in New Orleans right now. They're packing these portable deals you put on a ship to send supplies there. It's going to be a challenge till they get some infrastructure to deliver those supplies. The AFL-CIO has had people in the ground there. I've worked with Roy Gillespie since Katrina. He's a labor liaison with the Red Cross, which really opens the doors to participate in the benefits that they can provide to people in disaster. I think the labor movement's going to step up and be there. They have a proven record of doing it,
Good
and
stuff.
I can attest to that.
Louis, thank you for taking
Thank
time
you.
for us.
Appreciate it.
Really great talking with you. Louis Wren. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email us, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell us what you think, and maybe the stories of your union being active in relief or in your community. Right back. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. We're here at the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis. Yesterday, the big day of resolutions, Resolution 10 being the one that I want to talk about right now, the resolution to elect more union members to political office, something I've talked about for years, the idea to get working people in the halls of power to make those decisions, well, about policy that affects all our lives, especially at the local and state level. And I'm sitting here with my good friend Corey McRae, who for years came on the program, became an elected official, and then kind of moved on. Corey, good to see you, man.
It's great to see you, bro. Great to see
So,
you.
what brings you to the convention?
You know what? This is my first convention that I was able to attend. My vice president reached out and said, "Hey, would you like to go as a delegate for the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers?" And I was like, "Hell yeah!" And it's been one of the greatest experiences. The second day into the convention right now.
No, it's good stuff. But to speak to the resolution, it's something that I think all union members say. We should have more people like us who understand our needs, our wants, our dreams, especially in this era where we have so many politicians who are attacking labor.
Yep. Rick, I always say to folks that if they look me up in the van file, they would see that I hadn't started voting until about 10 or 12 years ago. And you realize that politics surrounds everything that we do. And as a member of the union, I would like to see other people that was elected, but I realized they couldn't cut through. So it's like, how do you create that blueprint or that strategy to show folks how to do it? And luckily, back in 2014, we were elected to the Maryland House of Delegates. And since being there, we've been able to lead on restoring voting rights for 40,000 people that are currently on parole probation, increasing apprenticeship opportunities that are project state funded by the state of Maryland, and just making sure that we have good wages, making sure that we have affordable health care, and making sure that hopefully we can retire with dignity when that time comes. But that would not come if it wasn't because of the Central Labor Council back home in Baltimore saying that we're going to not only endorse Corey, but we're going to endorse him early. And it wasn't no elected officials, it was the House of Labor that got that done.
Yeah, no, I mean, at the end of it, you've got to use that power of, look, this guy understands our policies.
Yep.
And it's always been one of those things that's been kind of amazing to me, that there aren't more. I mean, labor still has a very powerful voice.
Yep.
And the idea of getting people into those seats, to me, is just so important to stop some of the ugly stuff.
Yep.
I mean, I go back to myself. Look, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. We were dirt poor.
Mm-hmm.
But when I saw that person, those neighbors who got union jobs, immediately their lives got better.
Yep.
That story needs to be told over and over and over again, and especially in a place like the House of Delegates or where I live in the General Assembly. You go down, they need to hear those stories.
100% agree. It was a young lady on the stage, Tiffany, I think her name was Tiffany Jones, but how do we have more Tiffany Jones across the city of Baltimore, across the state of Maryland, across the country? And the policy has a big effect on that, whether we utilize that for state-funded projects, where we make sure that when you have state-funded projects, do these people have health care? A lot of times, we don't want to know these things, but when we bring it to light, somebody's got to do something to do it. And I think that when you have union members in those halls, in those seats, and making those decisions, we come up with a better product.
Now, being from Baltimore, obviously, Baltimore's got a lot of problems, like a lot of urban centers.
Yep.
And I'm not just picking on urban centers. A lot of rural areas are dirt poor too.
Yep.
But the media culture, the messaging, places like Baltimore, Chicago, Cleveland, where I'm from, where you have large minority populations, and I would argue, large poverty
100%
communities.
Yep.
You've got a lot of problems. How do you deal with that?
I think that it's very much income. Like you said, the poverty is just gotten so bad that you can't deal with it anymore. You have to look at this, address it straight to the face, and just head on and deal with those. I look at how do you make sure that in the city of Baltimore, we just want a job. So we don't know that there's an educational component, that there's certifications and things like that for apprenticeships, and that they create those opportunities. A lot of times folks will go to college, but I got paid to go to school, where everybody doesn't get that luxury. So having these vehicles and making sure that we can open it up and be very diverse with that is going to only help places like Baltimore, Chicago, Cleveland, as you stated, making sure that on these projects that typically, I'll explain it from Baltimore, the city will typically give you the building for free. The state will then come in and give you some type of capital fund, and maybe $1 million, $2 million, and then they'll hit the feds for new market tax credits. So you've hit every level of government, but we didn't ensure that the people on those projects can retire with dignity, have health care, make a good wage, are in some type of apprenticeship, but we have to hold ourselves accountable to the standpoint. So those are the vehicles that we need to start creating, and especially the educational opportunities, making sure that our K through 12 are not just funded in some neighborhoods, but all neighborhoods, and that is what union members can contribute to their legislatures, to their federal government, to their local municipalities.
I mean, it's interesting you brought up the building and how you get money from the state, federal, local, all the way down the line. You get it's the 1%, the Wall Streeters, the hedge fund folks. They seem to always be well taken care of. But the people who are actually doing the work, they're the ones who are getting screwed. And that's not just in building and construction. That's the breadth of the economy. Because I would argue union density has been declining, and well, union members have been under attack for years.
You have to put people in office that are sensitive to the needs of the regular people. And sometimes, even when you've served 40 or 50 years, we have some great people that have served in elected office 40, 50 years. But when you haven't been laid off in 40, 50 years, it's hard to understand the struggle of a person that's been laid off.
When you're struggling to get to that next paycheck, I get it.
So that's what we have to have. And I always say, in these legislatures, in these municipal governments, we need ethnicity diversity, we need age diversity, we also need union diversity, because look at some of the tier systems that's created. Those tier systems have an adverse effect on those young people, 18 to 35, that may be just starting out. I watch it every day, and somebody's got to be able to speak up for them. But if the person is 50, 60, 70 years old making those decisions, they're not really thinking about the person that's 18 to 35, and we have to push. We have to push from
what we've done in this country masterfully, Gloria, I think, is that we've created this Hunger Games scenario where we're always pitted against one another. And the wealth class loves that. As long as you and I are fighting because you're a black guy, I'm a white guy, or that's a woman, and as long as they can pit us against each other, subdivide us up into cute little groups,
distractions,
we're always going to lose. And this is one of those things where I look at education, supposed to be the great equalizer. And I look at places like Philadelphia, especially Baltimore, Cleveland, where now we've got these wonderful charter schools, and you see all of this money being siphoned and stolen off, and you see the opportunity these kids who are already far behind, just getting worse behind. How do we as a society, as a union class, how do we deal with that?
I'm gonna bring up two examples from Baltimore City. So we worked on voting rights, House Bill 980, when I first hit the legislature. And what that did was, if you looked at the zip codes in the city of Baltimore, 21210 is a zip code. You know how many people on parole or probation in that one zip code?
How many?
10. If you look at a zip code that I represent, 21213, it was 937. So elected officials say that they pay attention to everybody, but politicians pay attention to neighborhoods that vote and people that vote. So when you have 937 people that can't vote, that indirectly affects the African-American woman that have been voting since forever, since the 50s or 60s, you say, why is there 3 liquor stores on this corner? Why isn't our educational institutions getting the funds that they need? Why is it so much crime? Why is it high poverty? Why is it the abandoned houses and clusters of them everywhere versus the 21210 neighborhood? We can equalize that by making sure that we return to basic things like voting rights. Also, when you think about our educational institutions, when I first got into office, we got this thing in Baltimore City where we're building 23 to 28 new schools across the city of Baltimore. We only got 5 legislative districts, Rick. In one district, we're getting 7 new schools. The other district, we're getting 6, 5, 4. But my district, you know how many schools we're getting?
None.
2.
Oh, wow.
2. So when you talk about 3 times as many schools in one district versus the other, you say, why is that disparity so large in numbers? Because we're setting our neighborhoods up 20, 30 years because they're not getting those opportunities that these other neighborhoods are getting. That's just the new schools. Let's talk about maintenance funding. When I get into office from 2010 to 2015, my district was either last or second to last in reference to appropriations for the maintenance of our school buildings. I call this almost criminal what's happening, but we have to pay attention. We have to be mindful of these things, and we have to make sure that we lift up the people that have less so they can catch up with the people that have more, and that wasn't what I see. And that's why we need more union people there, because you know who cares about these educational institutions? The teachers, the parents, the people that don't have the most and need it the most to address these issues.
No, you're right. I talked to a number of AFT members, a number of NEA members, and they all say the same thing. You get into these inner city schools, and it's heartbreaking. Because you get kids who they're coming to school with a plethora of problems: broken homes, addiction, no food on the table, hungry, all of this stuff, and that's having to be dealt with by understaffed, underpaid teachers who are taking large sums of money out of their pockets just for pencils and paper and very simple things. So I get that. So the question that keeps coming back to it, I got into a lot of trouble for this during our civil rights tour. I asked the question of, did Brown versus Board of Education, was that worse than separate but equal? Because you look at our society right now, we're not even close to equal. We're separate, we're really separate, but we're nowhere even close to equal. So we can't even argue that we should at least be equal.
Yep, I agree. And I look at it from an apprenticeship standpoint. So let's take what we did this year. House Bill 467, we called it the Power Apprenticeship Act, providing our workers education and readiness. Right. So one of the things we did with this, Rick, we realized that on projects that the state of Maryland is funding, $2 million, $5 million, $10 million, they don't know whether people have health care on these projects. They don't know whether people have retirement. They don't even know the wage that a person is making if it doesn't hit that threshold of 51% funded by the state of Maryland. So what do developers do? What do municipalities do? They stay underneath for 51%.
50.9.
Yep, they want 50.9. 40% will fund it, and 40% from the state, 60%. But the state is still putting up a significant investment. And it was over $500 million worth of projects that's going on across here. What do? We said that apprenticeships is one of the things that Republicans and Democrats can both agree on. Right. We think that these create educational opportunities for young men and young women. Well, now that we got that far, how about we say that each one of these projects that are funded $1 million or more use registered apprentices? Because we know that when they're in registered apprentices, if Rick has a problem with his employer, you know where he can go to? He can go to his local DOL. If he's not a registered apprenticeship, he don't have that luxury. Right. You're gone tomorrow. He can then say, let's say I didn't get the wage that I was supposed to go through, because in the registered apprenticeship, you have to move to the next level because it's governed by a dollar back home in Maryland. How do we keep creating those opportunities is what we need to see. Where can we both agree on, whether it's Republican or Democrat, and say that this is right for our constituent and move forward? And I think that we did that from an apprenticeship standpoint.
Good stuff. And, to go back to a quote Ronald Reagan said, and I really hate quoting Ronald Reagan, but, a job is the best anti-poverty program.
100% agree. Income is very important.
Corey, I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you, brother.
Thanks so much.
Make more time, too.
Always great talking with you. Please, back early and often. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break back here at the AFL-CIO's convention from St. Louis. Wow, I'll tell you, we need more people like Corey McRae running for office. And look, more union members stepping forward and, well, getting into the halls of power. Look, what we've seen happen over the last several generations, the attack on what our great-grandparents built. We're going to be fighting these same battles again. And from this convention, a lot of the stories, a lot of the conversations I've had in the coming weeks, we're going to revisit, we're going to talk about, because what's going to come out of this convention just doesn't end here. It's getting out into the streets, it's getting unified, it's standing together in solidarity. Every generation has to rediscover that concept of solidarity and what it means to stand together. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me what you think as we move forward as a nation. What will help build a prosperous working class again? How do we, as a working class, how do we share in the wealth that our labor makes? Curious your thoughts. You can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next week.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1785. That was the day the General Society of Mechanics and Tradesmen of the City of New York was founded. 22 skilled craftsmen with the motto, "By hammer in hand, all arts do stand," met on Pine Street to form a benevolent organization that could provide culture, education, and social services to craftsmen and their families. 2 months later, founders met for their annual meeting. They represented many of the city's trades, including hatters, butchers, sailmakers, bolters, and comb makers. In his book, Chance Democratic, historian Sean Willett states, "The General Society was intended to be a semi-political umbrella organization for all of the city's independent mechanics, to help oversee the trades and secure favorable legislation from local and national government. The group captured the ideal of mutuality and craft pride essential to artisan fraternities since the Middle Ages. The General Society opened one of the city's first free schools at a time when there were no public schools. It established a tuition-free Mechanics Institute, the General Society Library, and lecture series. The Mechanics Institute, founded in 1858, continues to provide free evening trades-related instruction. The library, established in 1820, is the second oldest library in New York City. It is also one of the few remaining membership-circulated libraries. Its collections and archives span 2 centuries. The General Society continues its tradition of public lectures in the form of the Labor, Literature, and Landmark series. More recently, it has added the Artesian Lecture series that features lectures by master artisans. The series also promotes the work and art of skilled craftsmen. The General Society has been at its current location at 20 West 44th Street since 1885.